Hoi allemaal, welkom bij WithDenise. Je kijkt naar mijn eerste vlog. Super spannend, maar ik had de afgelopen tijd zoveel leuke dingen dat ik dacht, laat ik er maar een vlog over maken om dit met jullie te delen. Zoals jullie misschien al gezien hebben op Facebook, heb ik Mark Stevens geïnterviewd. Dat interview komt hierna, dat kan je hierna bekijken. En in dit interview vraag ik hem onder andere over hoe hij met yoga begonnen is en vertelt hij hoe hij door yoga in de gevangenis terecht is gekomen. Maar later hierover meer. Ik ben een tijdje geleden gevraagd door het Tijdschrift voor yoga om een artikel te schrijven voor ze. Superleuk, super onwerkelijk ook. En dat tijdschrift is nu ook uitgekomen. En ik blader even naar het artikel toe om een glimp te geven. Tada! Ik kan het eigenlijk nog steeds niet geloven dat ik hierin sta met een artikel. Maar ook leuk voor het nieuws voor jullie. Ik mag er eentje weggeven. En je kan erop kans maken door een reactie achter te laten op mijn Facebookpagina. En dan uit degenen die gereageerd hebben, dan loten we iemand eruit en die krijgt het tijdschrift opgestuurd. Dan gaan we nu weer terug naar Mark Stevens. Mark Stevens is onder andere bekend van het boek Teaching Yoga. En ik heb dus een aantal workshops bij hem gevolgd. Erg leuk, erg leerzaam. Daar ben ik altijd heel blij van dingen leren en nieuwe kennis en nieuwe weetjes. En zodat ik maar beter kan worden en beter mijn liefde voor yoga kan uitdragen. En ik heb dus ook de kans gehad om hem te interviewen. Super spannend. Wederom, ook weer heel onwerkelijk. Ik liep naar hem toe en dacht, Mark, mag ik misschien jou interviewen voor mijn Facebook, voor mijn YouTube kanaal? Al in de gedachte natuurlijk dat hij zei, leuk bedacht, maar dat gaan we niet doen. En hij zei, ja, awesome, let's do that. Dus, ik helemaal blij. En dat interview, dat kan je nu gaan bekijken. Met veel plezier. We're here today at Yoga Moves in Utrecht, where Mark Stevens is hosting a workshop, of a couple of workshops about teaching yoga. And I'm really honored he wants to talk with me. So, welcome, Mark.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So, when did you start doing yoga? And
I had really two starts, and one when I was very young. I was a teenager, and I'd had a lot of experiences in life that different things that made me become more and more curious about things like the mind and consciousness and questions I think maybe we don't start to ask usually until later, but there were things that were happening that made me start to ask these questions, and it made me become very interested in spiritual philosophy. And my first interests were really more with Eastern approaches. And an older friend gave me several books on Buddhism, on Zen Buddhism, on Taoism, and I started to read these books, and then I came to one by Alan Watts, and he kept writing and talking about yoga. So then I became curious about yoga, and I found another book, Richard Hillman's 28-Day Yoga Plan, I think it is called, and lots of pictures and explanation, and for about 2 years, when I was 17, 18, almost 19, I played with yoga in this book, and I also had a lot on yoga with Iyengar eventually, but these were my teachers, were the books, and I didn't really know what I was doing. Then I went off to university for many years, for too many years, and many, many years later I'd forgotten about yoga, and I'd also become very, very, very stressed out. About 25 or 26 years ago, I was very stressed in graduate school at UCLA. I had a very bad breakup with my girlfriend. I was depressed, I was kind of lost, I wasn't very healthy, and I remember a friend saying, you should go try a yoga class. And I remembered yoga, so I went off to a yoga class. And the very first time back in, I felt like something was very familiar, that I'd come home in some way. And I remember taking the class, and I felt really good. I came back the next day, I took another class, and I took another class, and it felt right in my body. And it also very gradually gave me a sense of how one can start to pull themselves up. And because I was very low, and I started to find in the yoga practice, it was also the teacher I was taking the classes with at that time, a man named Steve Ross in Los Angeles, who made yoga very lighthearted, very fun. He actually wrote a book eventually titled Happy Yoga that really suggests what he was doing there. It made me feel good, and I got more into the practice. And I soon met Eric Schiffman and ended up studying with him fairly intensively for a few years before I discovered Ashtanga Vinyasa. But it was a very important early part of my practice to motivate me to learn about basic aspects of practice, alignment and energetic actions, and the breath aspects of practice before I ever got to Ashtanga. And then I've kept doing this for all these years because it makes me feel good.
Why all those different styles, and what have you picked up from it? What did you learn from the variety of different styles?
Yeah, I would say first, I think there's a lot of wisdom, a lot of value in committing to one method and letting it speak to you, to really be in it well enough and deep enough to really get what it's about. I've tried to do that with some of the styles and methods that I've gotten into with Ashtanga Vinyasa many years, and being into third series with it and really exploring deeply with this. I found what it was about for me. And at the same time, I appreciate different perspectives, as though the different styles of yoga are different prisms through which we can see our lives, ourselves, and the world. And I enjoy the different kinds of insights. So the kind of learning that I had with Steve Ross that was much more free and playful, the kind of learning that I had with Eric that was also about being free and exploring, but much more specific in method and technique, I learned a lot from this. Same with Ashtanga Vinyasa. And each of the areas of the methods of practice brought something new to my practice. And I think it's important for all of us as students to try to get a sense of the broader array of practices so that we can make conscious and informed choices for ourselves in our practice. So that rather than always looking to adapt ourselves to some system or style of yoga out there to fit into it, that ultimately we want to come, I think, to have a personal practice, our own individual practice, and in that practice we can draw from these various elements to inform our practice. When I began to teach after teacher training in 1995, and I focused more and more on teaching, I realized that while I learned a lot in my teacher training, that there's a lot more to learn. And this motivated me to try to learn more. And so I've gone far more deeply into learning as best I can yoga history and philosophy and functional anatomy and physiology and other aspects that the psychology of it, they're a part of what we're doing. So I can be more informed in my own practice and hopefully be a better teacher. So I come from a family of educators. My father was an educator, both university and lower levels, other levels. My mother, very much involved in sharing in various ways, including in spiritual practices. From an early age, I felt drawn to sharing. When I was young in college, I was a tutor. I was eventually a teaching assistant. I eventually taught at LA City College and at UCLA. And so I have this background with teaching. And I also worked for many years in Los Angeles with the LA County school system with kids who were in jails and incarcerated. And so just being in teaching and in pedagogy, in that role, when I was practicing yoga and I was observing, appreciating my teachers, I would often have ideas or a sense of how I might do this if I were to do it. I took teacher training. I was not thinking I would become a yoga teacher. I wanted to learn more about yoga. And they called the teacher training program Yoga Teacher Training and In-Depth Study. So I thought, I can go deeper in my studies. But when I did the teacher training, I got bit by the teaching bug. It just made me want to do this. And I started with friends, a couple of friends in Los Angeles. I was teaching privately just with them, a couple. And we did this for maybe 6 months. And then a friend who owned a studio asked if I would be interested in teaching. And I went to sub a class. And this all worked out. And I don't know, it's been a long time since then, over 20 years. And I still very much am inspired by sharing the practice. And this is what I'm trying to do.
So from just regularly teaching, you became, nowadays you are known as the teacher of teachers.
Oh, I've been teaching for some time. Early in my teaching, I started a nonprofit foundation called Yoga Inside Foundation to bring yoga to people in difficult situations. People who are in jails and prisons and drug rehabilitation and mental health facilities and inner city schools and places where they might not otherwise have yoga. And I started to bring yoga to these places. Well, lots of other people involved in this. We established.
It's really beautiful.
And so this also expanded my understanding of yoga and of teaching, because in the regular yoga studio environment, there's a bit narrower population that that shows up there. We look at the larger world, and especially people who have a lot of difficulties in their lives, and it requires that we open up our minds a lot more to what it means to do yoga and to have a meaningful, healthy, sustainable practice. And as I started to do this more, it gave me more and more thoughts and ideas about yoga. I started offering workshops. And with the Yoga Inside Foundation, I also was helping the teachers work in these different environments, just based on what understanding I had of the needs and the conditions of the people there. And I'd worked for many years in lots of those kinds of institutions as a part of it, as a staff in these institutions. So this gradually gave me, I think, again, more insight into practice. And I started to then conduct my own teacher trainings eventually. And as I conducted my teacher trainings, I used what I understood from education also to put together what I hope was a good, strong yoga and teacher training manual. And then I would travel and I would see other manuals, and sometimes I thought, it seems like some of these schools could have better curriculum, better textbooks, better materials. And I realized that there was a need for something stronger in this way. And so this inspired me to write my first book, Teaching Yoga. It inspired me to also write my second book on yoga sequencing, because I think there are often lots of problems with sequencing where people have a lot of difficulty in the practice. And I wanted to try to help make the practice more accessible. And I think that sequencing helped with this. I wrote another book also on guiding for teachers on yoga adjustments, more about how to guide the practice. And in all of this, I then found myself doing more and more workshops for teachers, conducting teacher trainings, writing blogs and articles about teaching, being interviewed about these kinds of things. And little by little, there's this idea that teacher's teacher. I'm first and foremost, I try to be my own teacher, and my own best teachers are my students, and I try to always entertain the possibility of learning something from my students. I consider myself a lifelong learner, and the more I learn and learn more about the practice, the more I want to share it. I hope to continue doing this for the rest of my life. If it's helpful for teachers, I'm very happy for that. If it's not, okay, I'll keep trying.
So you wrote 3 books already, like you mentioned just now. And you're writing your 4th book.
I am.
Can you tell a bit about where it's about?
Yes. For many years I offered a workshop titled Working with Injuries. So we have students who come into our classes with lots of different conditions. Sometimes they've been hurt doing something in yoga or doing something out there in the world. Very common repetitive stress that happens, especially in flow styles of yoga, with the wrists, the arms, the shoulders, low back, knees. Students come into class with sprained ankles, with replaced knees or hips, with scoliosis, with all these different conditions. And it was clear to me that we need to work with these students with special conditions and injuries to help them with modification. And I look in the yoga literature and I find that it's somewhat limited, so I started to do more of the workshops on my own to help work with modification for students with various conditions, including pregnancy and natural conditions that happen through life. And at the same time, there are lots of people out there who've been working with yoga in a more specifically therapeutic way. And we see this mostly symbolized with the International Association, or captured in the International Association of Yoga Therapists. There's people who are trying to use yoga for specifically therapeutic, rehabilitative, healing purposes. And I became increasingly fascinated by this. Started to read everything I possibly could about every aspect of human anatomy and physiology, and the ailments and conditions and difficulties that we can have in life, and then tried more and more to understand how yoga practices can support and benefit us as we move through life and have these kinds of challenges to our health, mental and physical health, and which are very much, of course, part of this body-mind as a whole. And this inspired me to write a book about this. So I've now written maybe 21 chapters of the book. But this past summer, I put the book aside in order to conduct trainings, and now I'm traveling a little. And starting after the new year, I will finish the book and send it to my publisher in May, and then it will start to come out. So as a book, textbook on yoga therapy.
Nice. I can't wait.
Thank you. Well, I hope it is a useful book.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it.
Thank you very much for taking time and sharing with me and doing this interview. I appreciate it a lot.
Well, thank you very much for the time.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
Bedankt voor het kijken. Ik hoop dat je genoten hebt. Wil je nou meer weten over mij, over yoga, over de houdingen, over heel veel dingen over yoga? dan kan je naar www.WithDenise.nl gaan. Daar staat alles op. En abonneer je op mijn YouTube kanaal om van alle nieuwste filmpjes op de hoogte te blijven. Tot de volgende keer. Doeg!